True disturbing dark web stories. True scary stories dark web. There are corners of the internet where even the bravest fear to tread, where the light of day never shines, and the rules of society do not exist. I'm not talking about your everyday conspiracy forums or the endless chatter of social media. No, this place is much darker. A place where one click can change your life or end it. It's a place known as the dark web. You may have heard whispers about it, stories told around the glow of a screen in the dead of night. A friend of a friend found a website there that sells secrets better left hidden. Someone else knew a guy who made a deal with a nameless entity that promised him the world and took his soul instead. You might think of these as urban legends, nothing more than frightening tales spun to keep people from venturing too far into the digital abyss. But I assure you, the dark web is not merely a shadowy myth, nor is it just a digital boogeyman. It's very real, and it's more sinister than you can imagine. For those unfamiliar with this hidden realm, the dark web is not the same as the deep web, the part of the internet that contains databases, academic research, or subscription sites not indexed by traditional search engines. The dark web goes deeper than that, into a place that is completely unregulated and uncensored. Here, you'll find things for sale that no decent person would ever imagine, services offered that no law would allow, and activities that defy any moral or ethical boundaries. It's a haven for the criminal, the depraved, and the lost. It's a world that exists just below the surface of the ordinary internet, hidden from view, but always there, waiting. The truth is, no one really knows how vast it is. The dark web has no maps, no reliable guides. Each time you descend, it's as though you're wandering through a maze that shifts and bends, with corridors that seem endless and dead ends that swallow you whole. Those who venture there do so at their own risk. Many go seeking something, information, a thrill, or perhaps an escape from the mundanity of their lives. But the truth is, the dark web always takes more than it gives. Some lose their money, others lose their minds, and the unlucky ones lose much more. I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I'm not here to convince you of the truth behind these stories. I'm just here to share them with you, and you can decide for yourself what's real and what isn't. But be warned, these are not mere campfire tales meant to frighten children. These are accounts from those who have dared to dip their toes into the darkest depths of the internet. Some lived to tell their stories, scarred and changed forever. Others were not so fortunate. The following are 5 such stories. 5 accounts of individuals who sought out something hidden, something taboo, and found themselves in a place far beyond their understanding or control. These are stories of curiosity and horror, of the digital unknown, and of a darkness that seems almost sentient in its hunger. And if you think you're safe because you haven't gone looking for it, think again. The dark web doesn't care whether you seek it out. Sometimes it finds you first. So turn down the lights, lock your doors, and tread carefully, dear reader, as we venture into the realm where the virtual meets the grotesque, where fear becomes palpable, and where escape is not always an option. Welcome to the edge of the internet. Welcome to the dark web. Story 1: The Auction. Ben had always been the type to wander where he shouldn't, both online and in real life. He wasn't a hacker or coder, just a college sophomore with a curious mind and a thirst for the strange and obscure corners of the internet. It had all started innocently enough. Hours spent diving down rabbit holes on forums discussing conspiracy theories, creepypastas, and ghost stories. But then he overheard something in a campus coffee shop. 2 tech-savvy seniors murmuring about a special auction that took place on the dark web. Supposedly, it was invitation only, and the kinds of things you could buy there made even the most hardcore underground sites seem like child's play. The idea clung to his thoughts like a dark whisper that wouldn't fade. It wasn't long before Ben found himself sitting at his cluttered dorm desk late one night, his room lit only by the dim glow of his laptop. After hours of searching through Tor browsers and shady forums, Ben finally stumbled upon a post that seemed promising. It was an anonymous message board with cryptic discussions about an auction that took place only once every few months. A link was provided, but only those with an access code could enter. Ben's hands trembled with excitement and fear as he clicked the link. He had to try at least a dozen different variations of codes before one finally worked. The screen changed, morphing into a sleek black interface with elegant white text. "Welcome to the auction. Your access has been granted." A timer in the corner of the screen indicated that the next event would begin in just under an hour. His pulse quickened. The site was disturbingly polished, with categories listed down the left-hand side. Antiques, rare artifacts, exotic animals, and then things began to take a darker turn. Stolen identification, substances, human goods. Ben hesitated for a moment, a creeping sense of dread slithering into his stomach. He could still back out. He hadn't done anything illegal yet, just browsing, right? But curiosity got the better of him, as it often did. He clicked on rare artifacts, expecting to see stolen historical items or counterfeit antiquities. At first, that's exactly what he found: old books, ancient coins, and peculiar statues. But a few pages in, the listings became more personal. Family heirlooms that appeared to be keepsakes from real people, sold without their knowledge. Jewelry, locked diaries, and even hair locks. It felt like glimpsing into someone else's life, only they had no idea they were being exposed. The timer hit 0, and the screen refreshed to reveal a new section: live events. A banner at the top of the page read, "Tonight's auction, real-time consequences." The listings here were vastly different, and something about the terse descriptions made Ben's skin crawl. He saw entries like "Witness a real kidnapping," "Unexplained experiments," and most disturbingly, "Custom requests accepted." The worst part was that there were people actually bidding. Real money was being exchanged for events that no one should ever witness. Ben's hand hovered over the mouse. He knew he should stop. His rational mind screamed at him to close the browser, shut off his computer, and never look back. But some twisted part of him, whether it was the same curiosity that drove him to discover the auction or something darker, pushed him to click on one of the listings. Mystery event, no details given. Instantly, his screen changed. A live camera feed appeared, showing the inside of a room that looked disturbingly familiar. Ben squinted at the grainy footage, his heart hammering in his chest. Then it hit him. The camera was inside his dorm room. He was staring at his own cluttered desk, the same posters on the wall, the same stack of textbooks beside his bed. The chat box next to the video feed exploded with activity. Users were placing bids, not on objects or artifacts, but on him. The descriptions of what could happen to him next flashed on the screen. Door unlocked in 5 minutes. Surprise package delivery. Make him disappear. Cold terror gripped him. Ben's breathing grew ragged as he frantically tried to close the window, but the browser wouldn't respond. The screen went black for a moment before a message appeared in bold red text. "Too late, we know where you are." He felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The silence in his dorm room seemed suffocating, and the hum of his computer fan buzzed unnaturally loud in the quiet. For a second, he considered yanking the power cord from his laptop, throwing it out the window, or even sprinting out of his room. But before he could move, a loud knock echoed from his door. It was a slow, deliberate knock. 3 times, evenly spaced, as if whoever was on the other side already knew he was there. Frozen in terror. The story ends there, with the door slowly creaking open, leaving Ben's fate a chilling unknown. Story 2, The Friend Request. Amanda always had a knack for finding the rarest and most obscure retro video games. For years, she had trawled flea markets, online forums, and gaming conventions, searching for titles that were forgotten by time but cherished by true enthusiasts. Her collection was one of her proudest accomplishments, boasting games that most gamers had only heard rumors about. Recently, however, her searches had brought her to the fringes of the internet, and eventually, to the dark web. Rumor had it that there, she could find even the most elusive cartridges, games that were never officially released, prototypes, and bizarre homebrew titles. It was after one of these late-night sessions of navigating the murky depths of the dark web that Amanda received a friend request on her social media account. The profile looked ordinary enough at first glance, a generic username and a profile picture of a woman whose face was partially obscured by shadows. Initially, Amanda ignored it, dismissing it as another random request from a stranger. But when she logged in the next day, the account had sent her a direct message. Hey Amanda, big fan of your game collection. That rare Japanese copy of Haunted Manor you got last week is amazing, isn't it? Amanda's fingers froze over the keyboard. She hadn't posted anything online about her recent acquisition. In fact, she had bought the game from a private seller who didn't even know her real name. She brushed it off as a lucky guess or someone who had seen her browsing on the forums, and she didn't respond. Over the next few days, more messages trickled in. At first, they were innocent enough. Generic questions about her favorite games and which conventions she planned to attend. But soon, they became more personal. The stranger began mentioning details about her life that she had never shared online. Hope you enjoyed your morning latte at The Grind today. That's a great little coffee shop. Did you end up buying that cute pink sweater you were looking at afterward? A chill ran down Amanda's spine. The Grind was the coffee shop she went to almost every morning, but she never mentioned it on social media. Her daily habits were suddenly being laid bare, and she had no idea how. The details kept getting more specific. The stranger described what she wore each day, who she spoke to at the cafe, even the exact seat she took by the window. Panicked, Amanda decided to block the account and report it to the platform. But the next day, a new friend request appeared, this time with a different username, but the same profile picture. A black and white photo of a woman whose face was always obscured. The messages resumed, growing more sinister with each day. It's rude to ignore your friends, Amanda. I just want to be close to you. The messages began arriving more frequently, each more invasive than the last. That was a cute outfit you wore yesterday. Too bad you spilled coffee on it. Amanda's heart sank as she realized that this person was not just watching her online. They were observing her in real life, following her movements. She changed her phone number, adjusted the privacy settings on her social media accounts, and installed security cameras in her apartment. But the sense of being watched only grew stronger. Strange occurrences began happening at home. The lights would flicker at odd hours, her television would turn on and off by itself, and her phone would ring with blocked numbers only to hang up after a single ring. Late at night, she would hear faint tapping sounds at her windows. But when she checked, no one was there. Then came the anonymous texts. They would arrive in the dead of night just as she was drifting off to sleep. They were short and cryptic. I'm watching you. Or, you left your curtains open again. The messages were always accompanied by photos of her house taken from just outside. Her paranoia deepened, and she found herself compulsively checking the locks on her doors and windows, terrified of what she might find, or who. Finally, the person revealed their identity. It was someone she knew, an acquaintance named Lucas, a fellow retro gaming enthusiast whom she had met a couple of times at conventions. They had chatted a few times about their collections, nothing more. But now, Lucas confessed his obsession. He explained that he had been watching her for years, growing more fixated with every passing convention, every casual conversation. He admitted to using the dark web to find illegal tracking devices, which he had planted in her belongings and used to monitor her movements. He had even hacked into her electronics, gaining access to her cameras and microphone. When Amanda confronted him online, demanding that he stop, he only responded with a message that made her blood run cold. I'm closer than you think. That night, as Amanda was sitting in her living room, trying to calm herself down, the lights suddenly went out. She sat in darkness, her phone vibrating on the table beside her. She picked it up and read the last message, I'm already inside. Just then, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Slow, deliberate steps moving closer and closer. The story ends there, with Amanda trapped in darkness, waiting to see who or what would emerge from the shadows. Story 3, The Job Offer. David was a freelancer struggling to make ends meet. He had spent months scouring job boards, taking on low-paying gigs, and working odd hours just to keep a roof over his head. With bills piling up and no promising prospects in sight, desperation began to creep in. One late night, while browsing through obscure forums and hidden online communities, he stumbled across a peculiar job listing on a dark web forum. The offer was straightforward. Transcribe a series of audio files for a substantial fee. The amount was far more than he could hope to make through his usual freelance work. and despite the shady nature of the forum, the money was too good to pass up. David replied to the anonymous post, and within minutes, he received a response. The client provided instructions, a secure download link to the first set of audio files, along with payment details and a warning not to ask too many questions. The files, labeled only by numbers, were innocuous at first glance. David shrugged off any hesitation. He was in no position to be picky. As he played the first recording, David realized it was the audio of a therapy session. A therapist's voice, calm and methodical, spoke to a patient whose tone was shaky and paranoid. The patient, whose identity remained undisclosed, seemed to be suffering from severe psychosis. He spoke in cryptic phrases and jumbled thoughts, frequently switching to a bizarre language that David couldn't identify. The sessions grew progressively more unnerving. The patient rambled about shadows lurking in the corners of his vision and whispered of voices that wouldn't leave him alone. Each night, David would listen to these audio files, transcribing the sessions line by line. The deeper he delved, the more the patient's voice seemed to deteriorate. The recorded words morphed from mere ramblings into chilling confessions and strange prophecies. There were times when David found himself pausing the recording just to catch his breath. The tone, the language, the fragmented memories, there was something deeply unsettling about the content. Then, there were the background noises. At first, they were subtle, a faint rustling or a muffled sound that could be dismissed as the audio equipment picking up ambient noise. But soon, David began to notice more sinister sounds embedded within the recordings. There were distant screams, the scrape of metal against concrete, and a low, rhythmic thumping that seemed almost like a heartbeat. It didn't make sense for such noises to be present in a therapy session. The more he listened, the more certain he became that something was very wrong. One night, while transcribing an especially harrowing recording, David froze as he heard the patient speak his name. "David, I know you're listening. You always were." His blood ran cold. He rewound the audio to make sure he hadn't misheard, but the voice clearly said his name, with an almost taunting inflection. How was that possible? Was it just a coincidence or some cruel trick? He tried to rationalize it, but the eeriness of the situation made it impossible to shake the feeling that he was being watched. Feeling his paranoia set in, David reached out to the anonymous client, asking for more details about the recordings. The reply was curt and evasive, offering no clarity, but it came with an ominous instruction. Just finish the job. As the days passed, David's sense of reality started to blur. He began receiving mysterious packages at his doorstep, small parcels containing audio cassettes with recordings of his own voice. The conversations on the tapes were ones he couldn't remember having, filled with words he didn't recall ever saying. It was as though parts of his life had been captured and replayed to him, fragments of his own existence twisted and out of context. The final straw came when a package arrived containing photographs, disturbing images from his past. One picture showed him as a child, standing beside a dilapidated building that he couldn't recall ever visiting. Another depicted a darkened room with a single light bulb swinging overhead, and in the background, a shadowy figure loomed, obscured by darkness. He searched his memory, but nothing about the photos made sense. Yet, they stirred something deep within him, a feeling of dread that he couldn't quite explain. Determined to understand what was happening, David scoured through the recordings again, listening for any clue that could make sense of this nightmare. In one session, the voice of the patient spoke in a distorted tone, no longer sounding human. It repeated phrases that seemed almost like commands. Remember, you've been here before. David began to piece together a horrifying realization. These weren't ordinary therapy sessions at all. The recordings weren't about another person. They were about him. The sinister noises in the background weren't ambient sounds. They were memories. His memories. Distorted, manipulated, and fed back to him through the audio files. He hadn't been hired to transcribe therapy sessions. He had been drawn into a twisted experiment, one where his own sanity was the subject of study. The realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. Whoever had hired him was using the recordings to manipulate his perception of reality, dredging up buried memories and warping them into something unrecognizable. The The final audio file that David received began with an unsettling silence. After a moment, a voice that was barely more than a whisper spoke. "Welcome home, David." There was a pause, and then the faint sounds of a door creaking open, followed by footsteps echoing in an empty hallway. The recording continued, but it was different this time. He could hear sounds from his own apartment. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, even the distant murmur of the street outside. It was as if the recording had been made there, in his home. Just as the voice on the tape grew louder, his apartment lights began to flicker. A cold sweat formed on David's brow as the final words echoed from the speakers. "You've always been part of the experiment." The recording cut off abruptly, leaving him in silence. He stood in the dimly lit room, paralyzed by the realization that his life had been meticulously orchestrated by an unseen force. Then the lights went out completely and he was left in darkness. Story 4. The Red Room. Rachel had always been fascinated by urban legends, particularly those that lingered on the fringes of society. The stories she heard whispered among friends and read about online intrigued her, but none captured her imagination quite like the legend of the Red Room. Rumored to be a live stream broadcasted on the dark web, the Red Room was said to showcase real-life horrors, tortures, kidnappings, and unthinkable acts of violence, all presented as entertainment for a hidden audience. Skeptics dismissed it as mere folklore, but Rachel found herself drawn to the tales like a moth to a flame. Initially, she approached the subject with skepticism, exploring various chat rooms and forums to gather information. Some claimed the Red Room was a myth, while others insisted it was real and hosted by a sadistic mastermind who delighted in tormenting those who ventured too close. She spent hours sifting through conflicting stories, each one more gruesome than the last. The darker the stories became, the more Rachel felt compelled to investigate. She convinced herself that she could discern fact from fiction, and that her curiosity would lead to a thrilling adventure. One evening, while scrolling through a particularly obscure forum, Rachel received a private message. The user, who called themselves Watcher, provided a link to what they claimed was the Red Room livestream. Heart racing, Rachel hesitated. Part of her wanted to dismiss it as a prank, but the thrill of the unknown overpowered her doubts. She clicked on the link and was soon greeted by a live feed of an empty, dimly lit room. At first, the stream was uneventful. The camera captured nothing more than the starkness of the walls, an old wooden chair, and the soft flicker of an overhead light. The anticipation began to gnaw at Rachel. She watched the feed for what felt like an eternity, waiting for something, anything to happen. Then the atmosphere began to shift. The light flickered more intensely, shadows crept along the walls, and Rachel could hear muffled cries echoing faintly through the speakers. A chill ran down her spine, but she refused to look away. She was in too deep now. Suddenly, a masked figure stepped into the frame, obscuring their features. The figure's presence sent a jolt of terror through Rachel. She felt a mix of fear and exhilaration, her heart pounding as the masked person began to address the viewers. "Welcome to the Red Room," the figure said, their voice distorted and eerie. "Tonight we have a special guest among us." As the figure spoke, Rachel's blood ran cold when they called her by name. "Rachel, I see you. You've come to join us." She instinctively reached for her mouse, her fingers trembling as she prepared to disconnect from the horrifying broadcast. But before she could move, the screen flashed a chilling message. "Leaving is not an option. You're part of the show now." The words pulsated on the screen like a heartbeat, and Rachel felt a cold sweat bead on her forehead. Panic surged within her as the live stream continued. The figure began to describe her, recounting her interests, her fears, and her life in alarming detail. Rachel realized with horror that they had been watching her, tracking her movements and gathering information from her online presence. Each word cut deeper, a cruel reminder of how vulnerable she truly was. Just when she thought she might manage to escape, the camera shifted abruptly, and the feed turned into a live broadcast of her own apartment. Rachel's stomach dropped as she saw her familiar surroundings displayed on the screen. The camera captured the exact angle of her living room, her cat lounging on the couch, and her collection of retro video games neatly stacked on the shelf. She could hardly breathe, her mind racing with disbelief. How could they be inside her home? Her heart thudded painfully in her chest as she desperately scanned the room behind her, searching for any sign of an intruder. Then, without warning, the masked figure stepped into her view on the live stream, waving directly at the camera as if acknowledging her presence. It was as if they were sharing a private joke, and Rachel's blood ran ice cold. She turned slowly in her chair, her breath hitching in her throat as she came face to face with the figure, who had somehow appeared in her apartment. The mask's hollow eyes stared back at her, void of emotion, and the chilling voice echoed in her mind, "We've been waiting for you." A surge of adrenaline coursed through Rachel, and she bolted from her chair, scrambling toward the door. She had to escape, but just as she reached for the handle, the power flickered, and darkness enveloped her home. In that moment of confusion, a sound filled the silence, a slow, deliberate sound of footsteps approaching. Rachel's heart raced as she turned to face the darkness, her mind frantically searching for a way out. But the room was empty. The live stream feed abruptly cut out, leaving only the chilling echoes of her own screams reverberating in the void. The screen went black, and the viewers were left in stunned silence, unsure of what had just transpired. The legend of the Red Room had come to life before their eyes, and they were left to wonder what fate awaited Rachel in the hands of the masked figure. Had she become just another victim in a twisted performance, or would her story become a new legend whispered in the shadows of the internet? The unanswered questions lingered, as did the unsettling truth. Some curiosities are best left unexamined. Story 5. The Hidden Forum. Jake was the type of person who often preferred the glow of a computer screen to the bustling sounds of human interaction. An introverted tech enthusiast, he spent hours navigating various online spaces, immersing himself in programming tutorials and cybersecurity forums. One fateful night, while exploring the far reaches of the internet, he stumbled upon a hidden forum on the dark web, a place shrouded in secrecy and whispered legends. While scrolling through a series of unmarked links, he noticed a peculiar message flashing on his screen. It read, "Unlock the secrets of hacking. Knowledge is power." Intrigued, Jake followed the link, leading him into a shadowy corner of the web that promised access to exclusive information, an opportunity he couldn't resist. He felt a rush of adrenaline, imagining himself as a part of an elite group of hackers. He signed up without fully understanding the implications of his actions. Inside the forum, members introduced themselves with cryptic usernames like Shadow Cipher and Data Ghost. They boasted about their achievements in the dark arts of hacking and surveillance, exchanging tips and tricks. Jake felt a sense of belonging for the first time in years, and he dove headfirst into the world of underground technology. Initially, the tasks seemed harmless enough. Jake was asked to hack into abandoned accounts and retrieve forgotten passwords. The thrill of successfully breaching a profile filled him with a sense of accomplishment. But as he completed each task, the assignments became increasingly sinister. Soon, he was challenged to gather personal information on random individuals, like their addresses and phone numbers, using methods that crossed ethical lines. Jake hesitated at first, feeling a knot of unease in his stomach. He could see that the forum was not just a gathering of tech enthusiasts. It had morphed into something darker. Whispers of stalking vulnerable individuals and sharing their information for profit lingered in the chat rooms. But the lure of knowledge and the thrill of the challenge clouded his judgment. He felt trapped between the excitement of what he was learning and the chilling reality of what he was being asked to do. As Jake delved deeper, the weight of his choices began to crush him. One evening, while scrolling through the forum, he stumbled upon a thread discussing a particularly heinous task, tracking a woman's location through her social media accounts and reporting back to the group. A wave of nausea washed over him. Jake typed furiously, trying to convince himself that this wasn't what he signed up for. "I'm not doing this," he announced in the chat. But his dissent was met with a barrage of scorn from other members, who called him weak and naive. Their taunts echoed in his mind, blurring the lines between his thirst for knowledge and his fading morality. Realizing he had stepped too far into this dangerous game, Jake attempted to withdraw from the forum. He quickly created a new account, hoping to escape the prying eyes of the members. But as he logged off, he began to receive threatening messages. "You can't leave us, Jake. We know where you are," the messages read. The once comforting glow of his computer screen now felt oppressive, a window into a world that had turned sinister. Panic coursed through him as he noticed strange occurrences around his apartment. His phone buzzed with anonymous texts in the middle of the night, detailing his daily routines, what he had eaten for breakfast, the route he took to the grocery store. Fear tightened its grip on his chest. He felt like a puppet, strings being pulled by an unseen force. Desperate to erase his digital footprint, he began the process of deleting his account. His hands shook as he navigated the site, praying for freedom. But just as he clicked delete, a message popped up. "Too late, Jake. You're one of us now." Jake's heart raced as he felt the walls closing in. He glanced around his dimly lit apartment, searching for a semblance of safety. He quickly decided to confront the matter head-on. He logged back into the forum, hoping to gather the courage to confront the other members. In the virtual room, a sinister voice rang out. "You thought you could leave? We've been watching you, Jake. Every step you took." The member behind the voice, known only as Hexadecimal, revealed a disturbing level of surveillance. They taunted Jake, boasting about their access to his personal data and showing him real-time footage of his apartment, his life reduced to a mere spectacle. Jake felt trapped. He was in over his head, a pawn in a game far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. "What do you want from me?" He shouted into the chat, desperation lacing his voice. Hexadecimal replied, "We want to know how far you'll go for knowledge. Prove yourself. One last task awaits you." With every nerve in his body screaming for escape, Jake realized the severity of his situation. He could either comply with their demands or face the unknown repercussions. Just then, he heard a loud knock at his door, followed by the chilling sound of someone rattling the handle. Fear gripped him, and he hesitated, torn between his instinct to flee and the compelling pull of the forum's dark allure. As the knocks grew louder, Jake whispered a silent plea to the universe. "Let this be a nightmare." The door creaked open, and just as he turned to see who was there, everything went black. In the haunting silence, the story leaves readers questioning Jake's fate. Did he fall victim to the dangers of his curiosity? Or did he manage to escape the grip of the hidden forum? Forever marked by the shadows of the dark web, the line between reality and the digital world had blurred, and now, so too had his future. As the flickering lights dimmed in the cramped studio, the narrator settled into the shadows. The weight of the stories lingered in the air like an unshakable fog. Each tale, a chilling exploration of the dark web, had unfolded like a tapestry woven from the threads of fear, curiosity, and the inexplicable darkness that lurks within the human soul. He took a moment to collect his thoughts, 1,000 questions swirling in his mind. Were these events mere coincidences, exaggerated tall tales shared among friends, or perhaps glimpses into a harrowing reality where the virtual and the real melded into one? The narrator leaned forward, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. Each story you've heard tonight serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers that lie hidden beneath the surface of our digital lives. The dark web is not just a shadowy part of the internet. It is a mirror reflecting the darkest corners of human nature. It is a place where morality fades and impulse reigns, where the curious and the reckless venture, seeking thrills or solace, but often finding themselves ensnared in a web of their own making. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle, the dim light casting long shadows across the walls. It's essential to understand that behind each click, each keystroke, there exists the potential for something far more sinister. There are those who lurk in the dark, waiting, watching, and ready to exploit the vulnerabilities of the unsuspecting. People go to the dark web to lose themselves, searching for answers to questions better left unasked, and sometimes they never come back. With a heavy heart, he continued, "These stories are not just fiction, they echo the truths of our world, where obsession and danger intertwine, where curiosity can lead to unimaginable consequences. It's a landscape filled with faceless avatars, hidden identities, and the unsettling realization that there is no absolute safety in the online realm." As the narrator's words echoed in the stillness, he felt the familiar prickle of unease at the back of his mind. The room seemed to close in around him, and he fought against the creeping sensation that perhaps, just perhaps, he wasn't entirely alone. In the dim light, he reached for the switch, his fingers hovering over it for a moment longer than necessary. "So, dear listeners, take heed of this warning," he urged, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "Be careful what you click on. You never know who or what might be watching." As he flicked the switch, plunging the room into darkness, a whisper of air brushed past him, a reminder that the shadows hold secrets of their own. The finality of silence enveloped him, wrapping him in an eerie embrace as the echoes of the stories faded into nothingness, leaving behind a lingering question. Had he truly escaped the tales that lingered on the other side of the screen? And then, in the depths of the night, the soft sound of a keyboard clicking could be heard, a reminder that the dark web was still alive, and its secrets were far from forgotten.